when German drummer Anika Nilles admitted in a recent interview that she never really listened to Rush. Some fans immediately panicked. Others were furious. And a few believed it was the worst possible thing she could have said before stepping into the impossible role once held by legendary drummer Neil Peart. Because this isn't just any band. Rush is sacred territory for millions of rock fans. Their music is known for technical precision, complex songwriting, and one of the most respected drummers in music history. So when Anika Nilles was announced as the drummer for Rush's massive 50-something reunion tour, fans were already nervous. Then came the interview. Speaking with louder sound, Nilles openly admitted that while she knew Neil Peart's drumming, especially the iconic Tom Sawyer, she had never deeply explored Rush's catalog before joining the band. She said many of the songs she's learning now are completely new to her, and that she's basically starting from scratch. For hardcore Rush fans, that statement sounded almost unbelievable. How could someone lead Rush into a historic comeback without growing up obsessed with Rush? But the deeper people looked into Anika Nilles' story, the more complicated the situation became. Because, despite the controversy, she may actually be one of the few drummers alive capable of surviving this pressure. And in some ways, not being a lifelong Rush superfan might secretly be her biggest advantage. But fans weren't ready to hear that yet. And online, the backlash had already begun. Within hours of the interview spreading online, Rush fans flooded comment sections, Reddit threads, and music forums with one question: did Rush really choose someone who barely knows Rush? For some fans, it felt disrespectful to Neil Peart's legacy. Peart wasn't just a drummer. He was the intellectual engine of the band. His intricate fills, precision timing, and thoughtful lyrics helped turn Rush into one of the most influential progressive rock bands in history. So hearing Anika Nilles casually admit she wasn't deeply familiar with the catalog immediately triggered skepticism. But there was something many critics ignored. Anika Nilles wasn't some random replacement pulled from obscurity. Long before this controversy, she had already built a serious reputation in the drumming world. Her viral YouTube performances gained millions of views because of her incredible independence, groove control, and technical creativity. Professional drummers often described her playing as musical instead of just flashy. And that distinction matters, because Rush themselves weren't looking for a Neil Peart clone. According to reports surrounding the project, the surviving members wanted someone who could honor the music while still bringing their own personality to it. That's a dangerous balance. Copy Neil too closely and fans accuse you of imitation. Change too much and fans accuse you of disrespect. It's almost impossible to win. And that pressure only intensified because this comeback already carried enormous emotional weight. After Neil Peart's death in 2020, following a battle with brain cancer, many fans believed Rush would never perform again. In fact, bassist and vocalist Geddy Lee repeatedly suggested the band was effectively over after losing Peart. That's why this new chapter feels so emotional and so risky. Because no matter how talented Anika Nilles is, stepping behind that drum kit means stepping into one of the most impossible jobs in rock history. What makes this story even more fascinating is that Anika Nilles never tried to pretend she was the perfect Rush fan. She didn't fake decades of fandom. She didn't claim Neil Peart changed her life as a teenager. Instead, she was brutally honest. And strangely enough, that honesty may have revealed exactly why Rush trusted her. In interviews, Nilles explained that she approached the music almost like a student studying an entirely new language. Rather than relying on nostalgia, she began carefully breaking down Peart's parts piece by piece, studying the structure, dynamics, and emotional timing behind every fill. That approach actually mirrors something Neil Peart himself believed in. Peart was famous for constantly reinventing his playing. Even after becoming one of the greatest drummers alive, he famously took lessons from jazz instructor Freddie Gruber in the 1990s because he wanted to completely rebuild his technique from scratch. In other words, Rush has always respected musicians willing to learn. And Anika Nilles is exactly that kind of musician. Still, none of that stopped the criticism. Some fans argued that Rush should have picked a drummer who spent their entire life immersed in the band's music. Others believed no replacement should exist at all. To them, performing Rush without Neil Peart feels emotionally wrong no matter who sits behind the drums. And honestly, you can understand why. For decades, Rush wasn't just a band. For many fans, they represented intelligence, individuality, and emotional connection. Neil Peart's lyrics helped listeners through loneliness, grief, and personal struggles, so now every performance carries emotional expectations far beyond music, and Anika Nilles suddenly found herself at the center of all of it. As the controversy kept growing, something unexpected started happening. More musicians began defending Anika Nilles publicly. Professional drummers pointed out that technical skill alone isn't why she was chosen. It was her discipline, adaptability, and ability to handle insanely difficult material under pressure. And anyone familiar with Rush knows that's critical. Rush songs are notorious for complex time signatures, sudden transitions, and physically exhausting arrangements. Even elite drummers struggle to perform them accurately for an entire set. But according to musicians who followed Nilles for years, her style may actually fit Rush better than many fans initially realized. She has a reputation for precision without sounding robotic. Her playing combines technical control with fluid movement, something Neil Peart himself constantly worked toward during his later years. And there's another important detail many casual fans missed. Rush has evolved before. Over the decades, the band changed its sound multiple times, from hard rock to progressive experimentation to synthesizer-heavy albums in the 1980s, and then back toward guitar-driven music later on. Hardcore fans often debated those changes fiercely at the time. Yet many of those same albums later became classics. That history matters because Rush was never a band obsessed with staying frozen in the past. And ironically, Anika Nilles' outsider perspective may allow her to approach the music without fear. Instead of trying to imitate Neil Peart note for note, she appears focused on understanding the spirit of the songs first. Still, one massive question remained. Would Rush fans actually accept her once the performances began? Because online arguments are one thing. Walking onto a stage in front of thousands of devoted Rush fans is something completely different. In the end, this controversy was never really just about Anika Nilles. It was about fear. Fear that Rush without Neil Peart might feel incomplete. Fear that one of rock's most respected legacies could be damaged. And maybe even fear that time is moving forward whether fans are ready or not. But here's what makes the situation so interesting. Anika Nilles never claimed she was replacing Neil Peart. Nobody truly can. Instead, she stepped into a nearly impossible position with honesty, admitting what she didn't know, publicly acknowledging the challenge ahead of her, and putting herself under a microscope in front of one of the most passionate fan bases in rock history. That takes confidence. And maybe Rush saw something deeper in her than simply who knows the catalog best. Maybe they wanted someone willing to approach the music with fresh respect instead of imitation. Because throughout Rush's history, evolution was always part of the band's identity. They constantly experimented, changed direction, and took risks even when fans resisted at first. Now they're doing it again, and whether fans ultimately embrace Anika Nilles or not, one thing is already clear. She's become part of one of the most emotionally charged chapters in Rush history before even playing a single full tour. For some fans, her confession that she barely listened to Rush was a terrible mistake. For others, it may become the reason she succeeds. And honestly, that's what makes this story impossible to ignore.